So for a legal perspective, and this is the live look at Mar-a-Lago or West Palm Beach as the motorcade is approaching the resort that Trump now calls home in Mar-a-Lago. We're joined by Joseph Moreno, a former federal prosecutor. He's in Alexandria, Virginia, and good of you to take the time to speak to us again tonight. Thank you, Joseph. So what do you make of the indictment, the charges that we heard today?
Hey, Andrew, good to be with you. So we've had a lot of speculation over the last few weeks because of leaks coming from various places. And so we had to make some speculation about what we thought these charges would look like. Well, we're not speculating anymore. Now we know what they are. And they're pretty much mostly what we suspected, right? It's a combination of accounting violations, basically saying that accounting entries in the Trump organization's books and records were filed falsely, calling themselves legal expenses when in fact they were campaign contributions, and so, or de facto contributions in the form of non-disclosure payments. So it's more or less what we thought it would be. And so now we're kind of going to this new universe of having the first time a former president is charged in this country, and you can expect a vigorous defense and prosecution effort over the coming months.
Okay, so I want to ask you about what that will look like. But first, what's your sense of how serious these charges are?
Donald Trump has a number of very serious investigations he's facing, both here in Washington, D.C., at the hands of the special counsel, which relate to classified documents found at his home in Florida, as well as his involvement with the riots of January 6th. He also has an investigation going on in the state of Georgia regarding his interference in the 2020 election in that state. So when you take all that into account and you look at what's going on in New York, I think New York is by far the least worrisome for him. It's the oldest case. It's the most complicated and perhaps tenuous legal theory. I'm not away from it. He's going to have his hands full in dealing with this. But in the long run, I don't think Donald Trump is going to be too worried about the New York case. I think it's the other cases that are pending that could possibly be much more of a headache for him.
Okay, so this case, though, because this is the one that is before us, involves these election expenses that would normally be considered at the federal level. So why has this stayed in New York at the state level?
Well, that's why it's a tenuous theory. And the district attorney, Alvin Bragg, is going to have his hands full in the coming months explaining that. If you look at the indictment, it does not explain it very well. It sort of makes a vague notion that these are books and records violations done to conceal a crime, but it doesn't say what that crime is. And at his press conference this afternoon, he was asked that question and he kind of brushed it off. And he made some general comments about New York State and maybe federal campaign finance laws. Well, that's going to be a big deal because the defense is going to be all over that, saying, wait a minute, what's the actual law that's been violated? And to your point, Andrew, if it in fact it's campaign finance violations, that's federal law. That's a totally different system in this country. And so if the prosecution's case really relies on coupling New York State accounting law with federal campaign finance law, that's not something that's been tested before. And I'm pretty skeptical it's going to survive a challenge.
Okay, so now, so we'll see whether that happens, but we know that we are expecting to hear from Donald Trump tonight. From a legal perspective, does he have to be careful about what he says now that he has been formally charged?
Yes. So we know that despite the prosecution's asking for a gag order, Judge Merchan did not grant that. So he did not say that Donald Trump and his lawyers can't talk about the case. But he did warn Donald Trump that the kind of invective that he's used in the past, particularly some graphics about holding a baseball bat with an image of the district attorney next to him on social media, that's the kind of stuff that the court will be looking at very carefully. And so if he gets out of line, if he says anything that could be viewed as instigating violence or rioting or any kind of non-peaceful protest against the legal system, you can bet the judge will be looking very closely at what he says and could certainly, in going forward, put limitations on what he can say publicly about the case.
Joseph, again, appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Former federal prosecutor Joseph Moreno in Arlington.